they had like 30 or 40 song ideas, but they didn't have finished songs. And that was the whole idea, that we were going to finish that together. And I recorded it all all the pre-production, because quite likely that we were going to find something to keep for the record, and we did. There's a one entire song on the record that was recorded over there, and another one that's sort of half here and half there. But pre-production primarily should be about getting organized and building the relationship with whoever you're working with, and talking about the vision for the record, and trying to most of the time people come with more material than you're actually going to put on the record. So you need to start those conversations about and find where the common ground is, and where you need to push things and arrange, push them to better things and arrange things. Not get too far, but it's about relationship building, so that when you come in the studio and you're nervous and they're nervous, because it's it's the most important thing to everybody, that is successful, and it needs to go well. So it's really about relationship building and getting organized.
Sure. And when you're defining that vision for the record, I mean, especially with bands that you worked with before, like Kings of Leon, how much does A&R have a say? How much does management have a say? And for you, kind of, how do you balance all those interests with?
Well, it varies. If you take the Kings of Leon scenario, there is basically no A&R or management say so. Wow. It's just like what we decide to do in the studio. They're a pretty intense and forceful group of guys, and just the way things have worked with them, that's the sort of the privilege that they have. And as they've become more successful, they've renegotiated their deals. And this last record, there was no A&R person at all.
Wow.
For the record. It's basically, we make the record and we give it to the record label. Now, and that can work well. Other times, an A&R person or manager is very involved, and it depends on their creative skills and what their agenda is. But you definitely have to learn to balance all that stuff, because you're hired. In the United States, you're hired by the band. The band has the privilege of hiring you and deciding. But, for the label to actually release the budget, they have to agree with the band's choice. So it's kind of a little bit of a catch-22. Over in Europe, the label hires you. So you have to have the label's approval. I mean, they let the artist pick, but, it's the contract that I make contracts with when I make a record. In the United States, I make them with the artist. In Europe, I make them with the record label. And those are things, it's very difficult. You're expected, on the label side, management side, what is desired is for you to make something that's commercial or that can be marketable. So there's all of that criteria and wants and conversation. And then, it's what the band wants. And the band always, or the artist, then, one is more commercial and one's more artistic, and you just sort of have to navigate. I don't really know. I don't really have any specific advice there. But it is about people skills.
Sure. And you develop those as you go along, like you said. And, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about some technical stuff, because I know we have a lot of engineers out here and they want to talk tech. So maybe we could skip over tracking. I mean, I know you guys tracked in here. Or if you want to talk about maybe, I don't know if you want to play a song or just talk about a song that maybe you tracked in here, how you set up all of that stuff. But then also, I really do want you to get into a little bit about mix and some of the technology you're using on that. So you can cover as much as you want to there.
Do you guys want to hear the Cold War Kid song that I recorded in here?
Yeah. In this room? Yeah.
Pretty cool, huh? This room. So you get the idea, I guess.
Give him a hand on that.
Pretty good,
So now, did you? That was all tracked here. That particular track, or some of it?
Well, some of the I did some of the programming.
That's what I was going to ask.
Programming and the keyboards I did over House of David.
When we were going back to pre-production, are you doing any sequencing before you come in? Or are you doing that after the fact?
Sometimes I do. Sometimes, like on the Nora Jones record, Nora had spent 2 years writing all the songs that she'd given me. She didn't have a band. She wanted me to make a band, and she had some pretty specific sort of desires for the outcome, but with no experience, you know, sort of how to do it, and that's, you know, what she was asking of me. So, you know, sometimes on that record, on Nora's record, I spent a lot of time with another guy that's from around here, Matt Stanfield. Matt and I did all the programming for the record with her demos, just sort of just demonstrate to her like how it could be used as a foundational influence and, you know, sort of a direction to give the session musicians. Just kind of like a jumping off point, like a way to start the conversation. I would say that only 15% of all the programming that was done on Nora's record remains as part of the record, but it, you know, it influenced the direction and the conversation and the process.
Yeah.
So
you come in, you bring some of the sequencing, and like on this record, what you know, 3 or 4 minutes on maybe miking setup, preamp choice, that kind of thing. Because like I said, we have some techies out here that.
What I was going to say is, you know, like with drums, I don't really mic drums in stereo. I kind of prefer to record in mono, because it's a more cohesive sound. You know, 2 microphones over a drum kit that are sort of close is just a recipe for, you know, phase issues. I'd rather, you know, I kind of use, you know, like Glyn Johns, which you guys might be familiar with him, a British engineer, you know, like the Rolling Stones and Led Zeppelin and stuff like that. And then also Jeff Emmerich, who did the Beatles. You know, techniques that they were using is they'd use a mono overhead, and they'd use a microphone near the ride tom, the ride and floor tom, and they'd kind of use those for a stereo image. Like if you listen to Led Zeppelin 1, you'll note, if you listen to it on headphones, you'll notice that drum miking technique. You can really pick it apart once you understand what you're listening for. So I do something that's similar to that, a microphone over the top of the drum kit, and I spot mic other elements. It's like, so typically for drums, for me, it's like an overhead, kick snare, hi-hat, sometimes toms, sometimes the rack toms, sometimes not. It just depends on the song and the drummer, and so forth. Sometimes I'll put a mic on the rack tom and I'll mix it in with the overhead, and then a floor tom. And so kind of have like 5 tracks, and then I'll find some really nice spots in the room to put some room mics. And you know, sometimes let's say I'll put up like 4 or 5 mono room mics, and I usually try to find a spot or spots that are really good for the kick drum, the low end of the drum kit, and I'll blend whatever 2, 3 of those to one track, and then I'll do something that's sort of nice for the tone of the room and the snare drum, and put that to one track. So, you know.
So how much are you being like, I mean, I think I read in that article when you were over at Blackboard, they had something like 1,300 microphones or something to choose from. I mean, do you have a baseline mic setup that you start with in a room, and then? Well,
I look at, you know, you got to get good at going to a studio and looking at what they have and figuring out how you're going to make it work. You know, there's the things that are important. The vocalist is, you know, one of the primary things. So make sure you're not putting the best vocal mic on, you know, a guitar or something, because it's not the guitar. I mean, there's a lot of mics you can use your guitar. You know, Blackbird, the Blackbird has too much, and I always tell the assistants there, it's like, I don't care how many U47s you have. You know, I know you have them, so I'd like, you know, one here and one here. You know, get me some ones you think are, in your experience, are good. And if I don't like the way they sound, I'll tell them, I don't think that sounds right. Can you get me a different one?
Okay.
You shouldn't spend. That's sort of the downfall of having too much stuff to try. Thinking that you should plug it all in, because you know it's just like.